So you can hear us, Les?
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you, but someone else was saying Randy liked this or something.
Oh, okay. We'll be quiet.
Yeah. Is that Lani acting out of, All right, I'm sorry. I'm here. Are we ready to go? Is everybody here? Yeah, I can
Yep,
hear you.
we are live.
Someone else was saying Randy liked this or something. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 5:11. May I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. We're not going to close session. We're remaining in open session. So no presentations. Do we have any public comment that I'm unaware of?
We do not have any public comment. We checked right before the meeting began.
Okay, so looks like no communications, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so 8, the consent agenda, approval of the minutes from May 19th, 2020. Action, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved. Oh,
Have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 9, business and operation services. Award the contract to Field Turf to replace the football field and track at Rancho Cotati High School.
All right, good evening. So we have before you the approval for the Rancho Cotati field replacement project. We did update the board after we had the facilities committee. We did go out and take a look at the project. At that time, they agreed it was necessary to remove all the surfacing from the track, gate to the field, remediate the soil, and install a new artificial turf field and rubberized asphalt running track. At that time, we notified the board we were going to be going out and solicit bids for the project. And we did receive 4 proposals. And the staff is basically recommending that the project be awarded to Field Turf. And we listed some good reasons why we feel that they're the best contractor for this project. And so we're asking the board to award the contract to Field Turf for the project.
Robert, the fact that we now have to go to DSA, how much is that going to increase the project?
Well, we still have a $4 million budget on that, and we still will be in line with that, even with having to go to DSA.
Okay, so do we know how much how much extra it's going to cost?
Josh, do you have
so we're putting a $150,000 contingency in there right now.
Okay.
For this project, DSA is only going to look at access compliance. So they're just looking for the path of travel to the field and path of travel to the closest handicap restrooms, which the restrooms are in the stadium. So we're looking at, for cross slopes on the concrete that don't exceed 2%. So that's why right now we're putting a $150,000 contingency in hopes that we'll be able to cover it with any issues that DSA finds.
Okay.
And Josh, what's the warranty? Is it still 10 years?
Yes, this is a 10-year warranty. Actually, typically the warranties that all the other companies were giving us 8-year warranties. Field Turf is giving us a 10-year warranty.
For both?
Is that warranty prorated?
Is it prorated for the extra 2 years? No.
No, is it prorated over the 10?
So Josh, what he's asking is, does the value or the warranty kind of, are we going to have to pay towards the end of the warranty if they have to do some replacement?
No, it's for the 10 years. If anything goes wrong within the 10 years, they will replace the field.
Okay, all right.
Hey, Josh, this is Joe. Did they decide what turf they're going to use or what turf they're providing?
Field Turf, this is going to be, sorry, let me pull it up real quick. This is going to be core, Field Turf 2-inch core. And the The infill is a Pure Select, which is coconut, and Cool Play, the TPE that we had talked about.
Josh, what do they mean when they've quoted turf maintenance and track maintenance? Are they coming out and maintaining it, or is that the cost of maintaining?
Yeah, so I thought it was important that for all the bids that we made sure that we added maintenance in there, so it's
Okay.
covered for the project. So yeah, they'll come out annually to dethatch everything. They take a magnet over it and they decompact it, and yeah, so annual maintenance for the track and field for the 10 years.
Any other questions?
No, I just have a statement. I think looking at the cost, it's just crazy how much the prices keep going up. And looking at what the monthly cost would be to replace it in 10 years is like $29,000 a month. That's just, we could never raise that kind of money.
And unfortunately, we have to, because of the way the soil is.
Right.
Typically, you just want to replace the turf, but because of the conditions we have to do the whole field, or all the soil as well. It has to be remediated. So yeah.
So in 10 years, would we have to replace soil again, or are we assuming soil would be okay since it's prepped? Or are we just replacing the AstroTurf material?
Correct. The goal would be that in 10 years, 10 to 12 years, hopefully we can make it last a little longer, that all we would be redoing is replacing the turf.
Okay.
We're going to follow geotech recommendations and get it right this time.
Okay. Any other questions?
Are they, I guess we're still waiting. We have to submit it to DSA, or has it already been submitted?
We're waiting for approval tonight. We have Verde Designers on board, and I met with them again today. We're ready within a week to 2 weeks to submit to DSA.
So we're on schedule.
Upon board approval again.
Perfect.
And
Any other
lastly, what's the estimated completion date? Like the realistic completion date?
We're looking probably October, November. So I've already notified the high school. DSA is going to add a little extra time to the project. The high school is already aware. We were pushing for September 18th as the first home game. But we now believe that it's going to be October, November. So the high school is already working with Petaluma to use one of their fields for our home field next football season.
If we can even have sporting events by then.
Right.
Any other questions? If not, may I have a motion to award the contract to Field Turf to replace the football field and track at Rancho Cotati High School?
So moved.
So moved. Oh,
Okay. I'll take Carissa's as a second.
Thank
All in
you.
favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 10, Board Services. Update on 2021 budget. Anything new?
Well, I'll just say it's been an unusual year, to say the least, on many fronts, but I can really talk about the budget aspect of that. I wanted to give the board an update of kind of where we're at, but I also think it's important to know and remember where we've been. And so in 18-19, the board remembers we did have a qualified budget. At that time, we had the $1.5 million deficit for the 2019-20 school year, for this school year. And we did put together a fiscal recovery plan and came up with a way to mitigate that deficit for this school year. So for the 2019-20 second interim, which we presented to the board this March, we were projecting a similar deficit of 1.5 for the 2020-21 school year. And we know subsequently we had brought to the board some reduction of staff for both certificated and classified. And we felt pretty good at that point that we had dealt with the deficit Shortly after, we were notified that Grayton Ranchero Casino would not be funding not only the fourth quarter payment for this current year, but also the full amount for 2021 of $1.2 million. The news just got worse, and I think, for the board, we gave you an update on the May revision. And at that time, I believe we told you that the cuts to education for LCFF was 10%. There was some minimal relief provided by the state on that. The LCFF loss alone was $5,450,000. And then when you tack on the loss of Grayton Ranchero Casino of another 1.2, we started off looking at a $6,650,000 hole and how we were going to fill that. The state did provide some relief on that in the form of some federal dollars, as well as STRS and PERS relief and how we calculate the routine repair maintenance. But even factoring that in, we had a $3.7 million hole that we were looking to fill. So we've been busy working on ways to mitigate that, not only with looking at the budget and looking for areas that we may be able to adjust, but we also started to put together a pretty extensive list of cuts that we would have to make, mainly due to staffing on that. So the plan was to start moving those forward, but we got some updated news from the state level. We had heard that both the legislative budget committees, meaning the Assembly and the State Budget Committee separately, had worked on their versions of the budget, and they both came back resoundingly saying we're rejecting the governor's budget cuts. And they had a few ways to work around that in order to fully fund education. That's welcome news. However, we need to keep in mind that that's not final yet. And what we've historically have done is always build our budget off of May revision. And so we will continue to work on that worst case scenario, which that will be our budget. And as we told you before, the budget will not look good and will not be, we're pretty sure we're not going to be meeting the 3% reserve in all 3 years as a result of that. But as I said, it's kind of unprecedented times right now. So where we're at, again, the legislative body has put forth their proposals. The next step is that they're going to need to actually, by June 15th, they still need to officially adopt that proposal for the Budget Act that's the June 15 constitutional deadline. From that point, it becomes working with the governor, with the administration, before the 2021 state budget is implemented. The governor has the power to veto the entire budget or send it back to the legislature or approve the budget with line item reductions. So there's still a lot that we don't know at this point. The other piece on that is we still, even after the state adopts their budget, we're still expecting that the state may have to make further adjustments in the fall after they know the final tax receipts on that. So the plan right now is to present the budget to the board on the next board meeting on June 23rd. From there, we're going to let the news kind of unfold and kind of see where we're at. And hopefully the news is good. Hopefully we'll get our funding that we need. In addition, we're hoping for additional funding from the federal dollars that will enable us to have the resources necessary to open school. We know it's going to cost more in several fronts, and so we don't want that to be part of the current budget situation that we have. We would like some additional resources, but we truly don't know at this point if that's going to be the case. Once the governor approves the budget, and then whatever adjustments they make, we'll be adjusting our budget accordingly. And then the goal will be to have a budget that's going to show fiscal solvency at first interim in December. So by that time, things should have solidified. we'll have a pretty good picture at what we need to do. And that's kind of how the timeline's going to unfold a little bit on this. As I said, it is an unprecedented year. Mike, did you have anything to add?
I would just follow up by saying that, yes, we believe this is very good news. We believe that there's going to be some kind of relief, but I think it's important to remember that it didn't fix everything. It's not going to suddenly fund the district in the manner that we're used to receiving dollars. I know that we received some feedback that, oh, this solves everything. We don't have any concerns. We're not going to have to do any layoffs. We're not going to have to make any adjustments or reach any concessions with our labor unions. And I think that it's too early to tell. Rather than have Robert go through the exercise of thinking we know what might be included and thinking we know what may not, this evening we just wanted to provide you an update. We also made the very deliberate decision not to move forward with any layoff notifications this evening. We wanted to not raise anybody's concern or heighten their anxiety. People are anxious enough, and wait until we know exactly the kinds of dollars we need to continue to open school safely. So I think that, again, it's definitely good news, but as we've said too many times, the devil's in the details.
Well, it looks like from reading a lot of that stuff, Mike, that pretty much nobody knows anything at this point. I mean, everybody's kind of on hold till June 15th. What happens, I know in the past, if the legislature gets into an impasse, I know besides they don't get paid after June 15th, they could drag this out, couldn't they?
They could. I mean, all indicators that we're hearing from professional organizations is that they will adopt the budget on time. And with, I guess, the caveat or the expectation that the state will know what their state income tax returns or the dollars they were able to receive from taxes in July. And so that will give the state a clear picture of the dollars that they have to work with. And we would anticipate that probably we would get a budget update after that period of time. And then we may need to bring back an updated budget for the board to consider in August.
Okay.
So question, the number you gave us of 3.7 million is with an LCFF cut, correct?
That is correct. That's the 10% reduction in the LCFF funding, which was $5,250,000.
And that was, if the LCFF funding is given back, what happens to that 3.7?
Well, I think there's everything that I mentioned, except for the casino, is still in flux. So the LCFF cut is part of the May revision, as well as the federal dollars, STRS, PERS, maintenance contribution. Those all could change between now and when the final budget is adopted by the legislature or presented by the legislature. The only thing we know for certain right now is the casino funding. All the rest could change in one way or another.
I mean, I think one of the things that we believe is included in the bill or the trailer bills is that we'll be held harmless for attendance and ADA, that our funding will be based on our February ADA from the current year. And it will be based on enrollment, not on attendance. So that hopefully will stay there as we move forward, but that would be, would provide us a more predictable amount of funding that we may receive.
So what period does that go forward? So is that for a year?
I believe it's for the 2021 school year at the present time.
Okay, because, who knows what's going to happen come August with the virus and attendance and everything else, so.
Exactly. And that's why I think that the legislature has looked at this and realized that we don't know if somebody in our community, our kids or our staff, is going to contract the virus. And we once again need to quarantine a classroom, quarantine a school. And it would be just darn unfair to not receive the funding for something that's truly out of our control.
Right. So we really can't assign a number as to what our deficit is right now.
Not this evening.
No. Okay.
Well, right now it's 3.7 million if and until things change. So that's all we know right at this moment.
That's correct.
That would be the most absolute statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything is just what we know right now. That's all it could change tomorrow, but right now that's what we got.
Yes.
Right. And I believe, you know, other school districts, particularly those funded through LCFF, are in similar situations. So I think it's going to be a challenge for them to also present a budget that's going to meet the requirement for all 3 years, even if they have larger reserves.
I mean, one of the things we did in the past week was we met with the Sonoma County Office of Education, the county superintendent, deputy superintendent, and related business services staff to provide them an update of where we were based on the information we had. So they're well aware where we are and are ready to do whatever they can to assist. We got props because I guess majority of districts don't let them know what's happening, and they can't help them because they don't know soon enough. So we had a good meeting with them. It was encouraging, and I think they were glad to know.
Any other questions?
Hey, Robert, this is Tim. Is Josh still on the line too?
I believe so. Is there a question you have, Tim?
Yeah, thanks. It's for you and Josh. I've heard, I think Thurman said that the state might pay for PPE, but have you worked with Josh on pricing any PPE yet?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work looking at what we're going to need and trying to, I guess, get in line for some of those supplies that are out there. I've also heard that there could be some funding or the state actually paying for some of that. But again, we're not sure at this point. We need to plan. Sorry. We just need to plan accordingly and get the things that we need to have our schools safe.
One of the things in our meeting with Fiscal, we heard that they're using a number of the operational costs could increase as much as 30%. And so it's going to be a large number. We're just not sure what the number is going to be.
What would 30% be in dollars?
We haven't
Of our
calculated.
budget?
Well, they were talking about operational costs, but frankly, I didn't dig in to see what they actually meant by that. We just know it's going to be a large number, and I think it's going to be unique to each district too. So we're starting to plan, starting to order things, try to get ahead of it, and get what we need to keep our schools and staff, students safe.
Okay, and then just one last question on this topic. Is each school district in California going to be competing with the same companies for procuring PPE?
Well, it's been interesting, Tim. They've kind of all come out of the woodworks. I don't know how many emails that I've received, and I know Josh has received, for people out there with the product. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of demand for it, but there's also a lot of companies stepping up and letting us know about their product.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? I guess more on June 23rd.
Yes.
Thank you.
Will we be getting any? Well, hopefully we'll be getting updates as they come for crucial stuff before the 23rd also.
As we receive updated information.
Okay, thank you. If no other discussion on that, we'll move to 10B, Resolution 2021 naming of the theater at Rancho Cotati High School.
Yes, as the board is aware, we have had a group of individuals from Rancho Cotati High School advocating and encouraging the board to name the Tag Theater after Jim Pitt, teacher at Rancho Cotati High School. And they have gone through all of the appropriate process and protocol that's included in the board's policy. And this evening, there's a resolution on the board agenda highlighting the highlights of Mr. Pitt's career, and staff recommendation is to move forward with naming the facility as the James Pitt Theater.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion?
I think we have an individual to speak on the topic.
Okay.
I think Lani's here.
Okay, this is Lani Lowry, ex-teacher and resident of Rohnert Park. After 9 whereases, each followed by James Pitt, it's time to move to those words on your agenda. Be it further resolved that the Cotati Rohnert Park Board of Education honors and recognizes Mr. James Pitt for a lifetime of service to the students of Rancho Cotati and the Cotati Rohnert Park Unified School District. Now, therefore, the Board of Trustees dedicates the new theater on the campus of Rancho Cotati High School by naming it the James Pitt Theater, and that a plaque be installed in his name. Well, much has happened in our society in our world in the 3 weeks that have passed since the board conducted a public hearing about the naming of the theater. Not only have those events, the George Floyd killing, the worldwide protests, problems with the pandemic, the issues connected with leadership in this country, not only have they not diminished the importance of naming this theater after James Pitt, they have magnified its significance. Jim Pitt modeled the day-to-day life of tolerance, inclusivity, and proactivity for justice for everyone. For over 3 decades, he quietly showed students and teachers how change is made. Each day, every minute, every person should be treated with importance and respect. He did not lead protests sporadically, but did lead daily through subtle action and teaching and directing and coordinating discussions that address current and real-life issues. His agenda, long before it became vocalized, was inclusivity. Long before that word, inclusivity, attention, long before inclusivity became the movement that it is today. This model moved from exclusivity to inclusivity during the past few years. The move from leadership the leaders would be successful to a position that leaders needed to include 100% of its constituency where there is no success. Lead in a classroom, in a playgroup, in a club such as the A Straight Alliance, that all members name the theater. Naming the theater.
I can't even hear you anymore, Lani.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
You're just a little bit muddled.
I'm sorry. You know what? Let's just move on to it. Now, 5 of you, through your vote, not only name a theater, but also make a significant gesture to our community, society, and world. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we vote on this? Okay. Can I have a motion for this resolution, please?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Trustee Brown,
Yes?
Trustee Chimino,
Yes.
Trustee Gillis,
Yes.
Trustee Nahn,
Yes.
Trustee Wilchermood,
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0. Thank you. We will go on to 10C, reopening the school planning update
Thank you.
discussion.
We're going to bring that up. Go ahead. Kirby, next slide.
It's up and ready to go.
So the purpose of this evening's overview is to share with the board and the community what we know today, and to be very clear that probably most of the things we say today are subject to change due to shifting circumstances. We're going to go over the many considerations and decisions that the district needs to make to reopen schools. We enter into this with an awareness of many of the family circumstances in our community, the need for childcare, if we were able to look at continued distance learning or some type of a hybrid model. Unfortunately, despite the desire in our community, we're unable to describe today how schools will be organized when schools reopen. And I think it's important to remember that we are educators, we're not health professionals, and we need to rely on those professionals to advise us on health protocols that we need to implement to ensure that schools open safely. Next slide. So I believe that when we finish with this presentation, there will be many more questions than we have answers for. Next slide. So just a few of the questions that we know right now is, will there be flexibility and relief from state guidelines? And I'm looking at this is in terms of the instructional minutes, in terms of the number of school days, in terms of some of the mandates that the district must comply to. While we've heard encouraging words that some of those mandates may be relieved, we don't know yet. We don't know what will the Sonoma County COVID-19 stage be in July or August. Currently, the county remains in stage 2, which means no in-school classes are permitted. And if the county moved to stage 3, we could begin in-school classes, but in compliance with the health guidelines. The county health officer has not made a determination yet. There is some concern that we would not be at stage 3 when we reach the first day of school. We touched on this earlier, but will we have the funding necessary to implement the health and safety guidelines? How can we best support the needs of families? What agreements can we reach through collaboration with our labor partners, RIPSIA, CSCA, and SEIU? And we know that there's going to be unanticipated circumstances that we haven't thought about or nobody else has as well. Next slide. So in the last week, in the last couple of days and this week, we are getting some guidance. Yesterday, the California Department of Education released a reopening school guidelines entitled Stronger Together. It was developed in collaboration with the California Department of Health as well as Cal OSHA. It's expected that this week, the Sonoma County Office of Education will provide local reopening guidelines. And again, many of our decisions are going to be based on the determination of what the Sonoma County Health Officer determines in terms of what stage will the county be in when we'll start. And we don't know what we don't know. The next slide. So the document that was released yesterday at the state level identified these areas as really they provided a checklist for each area: health and safety, the instructional program, professional relationships and learning, continuity of relationships and learning, mental health and well-being for all, communication and community engagement, and school services. We're going to touch on each of these. It's a 60-page document, and we would be here for a long time if we went through each of the boxes that they're asking that school districts check off. Next slide. The first, health and safety. We have said many times that we are not going to open school unless we can do it safely. And so some of the conditions, the local conditions that we need to prepare and anticipate are, is there flexibility or a lifting of the statewide stay-at-home order? The same for, is there flexibility or a lifting of the Sonoma County stay-home order? Has the local health officer provided clearance for schools to open? Does the district have sufficient equipment available to address the health and safety needs. We're talking about PPE, cleaning supplies, those types of things. Do we have a plan in place? We have a plan in place to address positive COVID-19 cases that could occur in schools, in a classroom, at a school site, a student, staff. There will be active screening for entry and during the school day for both students and staff. They're recommending mandatory temperature checks for all students and staff, and also observation of potential symptoms during the school day. A long list of defined hygiene practices, and important of staff training that some of that back to school orientation we do for kids is likely going to be how to wear a mask, when do you wear a mask, where are the areas that you're able to walk and be outside. We're gonna have to train staff how to do that. And again, we need to make sure that we have adequate funding to do that. Next slide. Protective equipment. Again, we just mentioned training on proper use. We believe at this point that face coverings are going to be required for students and staff. They could be cloth masks, they could be protective shields, could be a combination of both. And then for each kind of category of staff members, there's going to be different types of PPE that they're going to be required. So we're going to have some folks that are doing this screening. And so taking temperatures and having contact with all the students or staff that come in. They're likely going to have a more intensive level of PPE. The office staff and food service that has direct contact, physical contact, or potential physical contact with staff and students. Our custodial staff, who's going to be responsible for all the disinfecting and cleaning, and that's a long list. And then for our instructional staff, our teachers and our instructional assistants, what do we need to provide them so that they're safe in the classroom setting? And then again, it appears that there's going to be a requirement that students also have PPE. And at this point, it appears that it's just going to be face coverings. But again, the district will need to make sure that we've established what are the guidelines that we need to train and inform students and families about. And again, this will require adequate funding. Next slide. Physical distancing, we believe, is going to be in place as we prepare to open school. This means that the guideline is currently the 6-foot physical distancing. Of course, that could change, but currently that is the expectation. This means that we have to limit the number of people on campus. We would make it would be challenging to have parents on site assisting in classrooms because of the potential infection or their exposure to potential infection. It means we're going to have to look and consider how do we organize in smaller cohorts of students. We're going to need to look at minimizing the movement of students. So for example, the students stay in the classroom, perhaps the teacher moves from class to class as opposed to kids moving. We need to determine the capacity of each classroom. Most classrooms, standard classroom is 960 square feet, which currently means 12 students could be in the room. Again, this could be adjusted slightly depending on how you organize the room. We may be able to get as high as 15 kids. We're looking at staggered arrival and departure. As you can imagine, if we have an entire school arrive at 8:15, 8:30, checking each of checking the temperature of each of those students is going to take a long time. And we might look at needing to have kindergarten arrive at this time, first grade at this time, which further complicates drop off for families, because we know that families typically have one student or they have other students at different grade levels throughout the district. If we there's a lot of encouragement to open playgrounds and have kids out in the open outdoor space. This means for us increasing our level of supervision so that kids are maintaining physical distance and are safe, and limiting activities to no physical contact. And then we have to limit or look at how do we disinfect and sterilize things like playground balls or any of the equipment that they have out on the playground. And then as well as any of the outdoor structures, how do we disinfect those in between the utilization of kids? Food service, We have experience with this as we provided food service over the last several months, but making sure that our staff is following those guidelines of physical distancing. And just as we have a limited number of students that can be on campus, we believe there's going to be a limited number of staff allowable on the site at any one time. Next slide. Cleaning, disinfecting. We will need to update and revise our overall cleanliness standards. So this means that we need to look at disinfecting between the use of desks, chairs, keyboards, copy machines. So after a group or individual uses it, they would have to be disinfected. And then disinfecting frequently throughout the day, door handles, handrails, drinking fountains, restroom surfaces. And again, we will need to plan that in the likelihood that a student or a staff member may have COVID-19 infection, and they may need to be quarantined away from other students. And there is a suggestion that anywhere that student or staff member will need to be unoccupied for 24 hours and then disinfected. Real encouragement to increase outdoor air circulation. If it's possible to have doors and windows open. But we all know that when school opens, it's typically very warm. And the challenge of having doors and windows open just creates another challenge for us. We believe to implement these overall revised cleanliness standards that we're going to need to provide additional staffing. We just don't have enough people on board that are going to be able to keep up with this level of disinfecting and cleaning. The need for funding. Next slide. Moving into the instructional program, looking at how instructional planning. This is, as we learned from the distance learning over the last several months, that we need a good amount of planning time. You know, we ask teachers to make the shift in normally a couple of days, and they rose to that Herculean effort and did a stupendous job. But we know that we need to make sure that they're provided with adequate time to really think about how we're going to deliver grade level and subject area instruction. We mentioned this before, but any of our considerations, we do need to be cognizant of family circumstances and potential childcare. We need resources for our staff to work together to design and lead change in the classroom. It's not going to be business as usual because it can't look the way it's always been. We need our staff to figure out how we can continue with the implementation of state standards so that students continue to reach grade level performance standards as we move through the system. We need to make sure that we have specialized plan for our students with disabilities, students with an IEP, and our English learners. We need to determine, so what are some innovative ways that we can look at learning barriers? What are some challenges? We know some of the challenges we experienced when we opened with distance learning of how do we meet the needs of individual students who are struggling? How do we meet the needs of our specialized populations? And along with our academic interventions, we know that there is a high level need for social emotional interventions. We know that this situation is stressful and challenging and brings up lots of concerns for kids and adults alike. And again, this is another adequate funding issue. Next slide. It appears that we're going to have to look at some different instructional scheduling models. And there are a long list of what this could look like. You know, we also have the opportunity that we could create a model that works just for us here at Cotati Roanoke Park. But some of the conversation around this is, first and foremost, we're going to have to develop our instructional schedule based on the health and safety guidelines we just talked about. It's going to take innovation, it's going to take time, and it's going to take additional people. We know that we need to create opportunities for our staff to collaborate with their people at their school site, people at their grade level across the district, interaction with our instructional team at the district office to make this really happen. We want to take what we learned in the spring and move it forward so that we can take what we've learned and make the adjustments we need. So a few of the models that have come up. The first being continued distance learning. Do we continue to distance learning? And that again could be based on what stage Sonoma County is in. It could be based on the fact that we don't have the appropriate health and safety gear in place to open school and need to continue distance learning. There's so many pieces that go into what we're going to be allowed to do based on that at the time. One model is a 2-day rotation of blended learning. And this is the model where some students come on, it could be Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, or it could be Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday, and having the 5th day be a time for intervention, be a time for teacher planning, be a time to do some individualization or intervention with particular students that need it. An A/B week blended model. This would be a week on, a week off, where the student would be in class for the 5 days, and the following week would be a distance learning week. Looping structure. You're probably familiar with this in elementary schools. There's times where we have the teacher stay with the kids. So the kindergarten teacher moves to 1st grade with the whole class. And again, so that teacher knows the kids know the teacher, and many times it eliminates some of that getting to know you and opening of school practices. Early or late staggered schedules. Again, we could look at, do we have some kids come in the morning and some kids come in the afternoon? But what does that look like for our teachers? Our teachers only have so much they can do in a given day. And again, it can be challenging. And then we have to look at, do we repurpose some of our staff? If we're doing a distance learning model, are there some of our teachers, like PE teachers, or perhaps music or other elective teachers, that if we're doing distance learning, we just can't make that work? But is there a way that we can utilize those staff members to support the core academic program? And again, this looks for additional funding. Next slide. As we look at collaboration and assessment, we need to again go back to the state frameworks as our guidance documents. We have to prep kids that school's going to look different. And again, that's going to take adjustment and training and guidance. We want to make sure any plan we have ensures access for all students. And as we bring kids back, we want to develop what are some diagnostic tools or initial screenings that we want to do to find out where kids are. We anticipate that there's been a level of learning loss over the past several months just because of how things rolled out. But we also know there's that quote unquote summer slide that sometimes happens over each school year. And so we're going to want to have a clear picture of where kids are. That leads to clear learning goals for students. It leads to how do we monitor their progress and then do intervention if we need to do that. Again, staff collaboration and planning. Do we have in the elementary grades, do we have one teacher that's going to teach science and a different one that's going to teach social studies? Look at how do we maximize our staff in an effective way that really provides a good program for kids. We want to make sure that we're effectively utilizing accessible technology. And we know that we need to provide professional development opportunities for staff. And we need that our teachers and our principals at sites need to have protocols for communicating with families so that there are really clear structures so that families can anticipate the types of communication they're going to get from the teacher, from the school, from the district, and when are they going to get those. Next slide. The next area we're just going to touch on is professional relationships and learning. As we learned this spring, this was a large transition for everyone. And part of our success, I believe, is that our teachers, our students were able to develop relationships beginning last August. And so when we moved to distance learning, they already had a relationship. They knew each other. They knew how they worked together. But if we begin August with a whole new group of kids, new teachers, then it's going to be a transition, and we want to make sure that we support and nurture our educators just in terms of
6 o'clock.
Recognizing the challenges that they're facing, and recognize that for students and staff alike, there is an added strain. There is some levels of isolation in a digital environment. And to make sure that we have relationships building, How do we get continual feedback from students, families, and staff, and just checking in? Is this working for your family? Is this working for your student? And for us to listen to staff, is this working for you, working with kids and families? And again, we want to look at what are the best practices we can utilize so that we make good use of our staff's time and energy, so that we're doing things we know really work. Next slide. Again, this just continues this area. We want to make sure that, again, relationships and connectedness are built in. And how do we do that in a distance learning format? Next slide. The mental health and well-being of all continues to be a significant topic around reopening of school. We have done much to have a greater level of awareness of the social emotional needs of kids. We need to be considering that for many students or families, the COVID-19, what's happening around racial injustice, what's happened around the fires, power outages, you know, it can leave some fairly traumatized. And so how do we respond to what those traumatic needs might be? How do we recognize them? What do we do to support and assist them? How do we connect with families to promote attendance? The importance of being online or in school. But we know that some families are going to have concerns about sending their kids to school. How do we determine and promote what are the available mental health services we have in support? And again, it's not listed here, but what community partners can we access that can help us do this job? Or do we also need to hire additional mental health professionals to be on site to support this at every school site? You know, it's important for us to be a resource hub for families, that we need to be able to provide them information about just meeting their basic needs. You know, food banks or food pantries, Medi-Cal, unemployment support, CalFresh, making sure they have internet access. For many in our community, these are going to be circumstances, and we can provide much of that information. Again, we need to be inclusive of reminding people about what are things they need to do to take care of themselves, what are some stress management techniques, and what are some support systems that are available to help them go day to day, week to week. Next slide. Communication engagement. We need to ensure that we have a system for frequent, transparent, two-way communication. We need to ask each group, what is the communication method that you prefer? Is it email? Is it text? What is it? So that we're being responsive and that families have more than one way to get the information. Putting out key messages so all people know the same information. Making sure we have all of our documents and communications in English and Spanish. Frequent messaging to avoid confusion and misunderstanding. You know, just talking through some of the things we've just gone through right now, there could be a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. And so it's going to be up to us to break it down so people can understand it. Developing some type of a frequently asked questions document or access. We know that there's going to be questions that get asked frequently. And if they can't get a hold of someone, we want to be able to refer them to a source where they hopefully can get the message. We want to make sure the messaging from our school sites in the district is consistent, that it's not different at this school as opposed to this school, that it's consistent throughout the district so families and students and staff aren't getting different communications based on who the principal is, who the teacher is, those kinds of things. We need to look at conducting focus groups and listening to constituents about how things are going. We are just in the process, we're just about to push out our first surveys to families and to staff, asking them about what are their plans or what are they thinking or what are their concerns for returning to school. We need that information to help us in our planning. We're also about to convene a task force that will really be a core team representing our teachers, our classified support staff, our district office, our families, our community, so that we can get perspectives from everyone. And so we're looking at developing a core team task force that then may splinter off into particular areas of focus. But we want to be able to make sure that we're being inclusive, and we can't do it alone. We need the help of really everyone in the community. Next slide. School services, transportation. you know, the 6-foot distancing is also going to be applicable to school buses. And so we contract out for our bus service, but we're going to have to make sure that our transportation provider is planning on what seating is going to look like, having loading and unloading protocols. It could be, you know, the last student to get off the bus is going to get on the bus first. And then what are the cleaning protocols for each bus after each group of students is on it? In service, we have established health, hygiene, cleaning, and sanitation standards, meal preparation. We're going to have to determine how we deliver meals to students and where do they eat. Is it in each classroom? Is it in a cafeteria? Is it outside? Because we're going to have to ensure that social distancing is in place during those meal periods. Next slide.
Mike,
Yeah.
has there been any discussion about would kids need to have their temperature checked prior to getting on the bus?
Yes, that as well. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yep. So our next steps immediately are, as I mentioned, we are going to begin surveying families and staff this week. We're going to continue to advocate for the necessary funding for us to open schools safely. We are first and foremost planning for the health and safety guidelines. As I mentioned, we're forming a stakeholder task force. We need to begin collaboration conversations with our labor groups because each of the collective bargaining agreements has agreements between the district and that group. And we may need to look at how we work together in a different way. And so that's going to require collaboration and their assistance. We've begun to make some inquiries with local childcare providers. You know, our after-school program for the elementary provided by the YMCA. We've had some initial conversations about could we expand that? Is there a way that the district could provide childcare somewhere? You know, again, what does that look like? But we know that takes that. Another is we have continued to be in consultation with Dr. Perez as she will become the superintendent effective July 1st. And so she's been included in a lot of these conversations and providing input on what are some things she would like to see get started before she officially begins. And next slide. And with that, I'm sure there's some questions.
Mike, I have a question, or about 5,000, but in reading the Stronger Together, the 62-page document, some of the things you touched on are pretty much things that they're not going to budge on at this point. I mean, they've got redrawing, updating your IIPP, for example, this passive screening of students. Who's going to do that every day? I mean, kids are used to just coming on campus any which way. We have no fencing, so they're just going to come onto campus.
Yeah, we're going to have to establish this is the entry point for students, and this is the entry point for staff, because at this point in time, you know, we have considered in our thinking that, well, we would like families to take the temperatures at home before to do a pre-screen for us. However, there are people in our community that don't have access to thermometers because they can't afford them. And so
Right.
Those types of things that, again, we have to think at from an equity perspective, and how do we make sure that we get good information, and how do we not put an undue burden on families?
So here's my next question. With all of the protocols of what we know today, and they're going to be pretty stringent with 6 feet of distancing, and I get all the childcare, I mean, I get all of the stuff that people are going to have. You're going to have those that want to go back to return to school as normal, and I think that's the first thing that parents, staff, the community needs to understand, that that's not going to happen this fall. So I think that's the first thing that people need to kind of understand, is that all students are not going back to all of our school sites business as usual. And so I'm wondering, is there a looping model with strictly distance learning, say, through the fall? What would that look like? Has anybody talked about that? Letting kids stay with the teacher they had last year, but doing it all 100% distance learning?
Not, we haven't gotten that specific yet. We want to engage our professional staff and have those conversations because I think we can make that work in many cases. There are other cases where that same teacher doesn't work here anymore. They retired. Some of those kinds of things, but I think it's worth looking at. Just given the fact that there's already relationships with those students and families. And it could be easier for everyone, but I think we want to get input and feedback from stakeholder groups before we move in that direction.
Yeah, I'm just concerned, even if we had 12 kids in a class, what do you do with the other 12? Like, is the teacher supposed to have her Zoom from 8 to 3 and you got some kids in the classroom and some kids at home, and who gets to decide what kids get to be in the classroom and what kids get to be at home? I mean, I think the questions just start to get so crazy. I don't know. And then the teachers are going to have to wear protective shields so that the students can see their expressions. I mean, that's in this 62-page document.
And again,
So,
it's a guidance document. The CDE is not going to impose those on a district. However, just given the health and safety protocols, I think some of those are going to be non-negotiable, as you identified. I mean, Sonoma County has begun to reopen, but Marin County is probably 3 to 4 weeks behind Sonoma County, just in terms of some of the reopening that's occurred. Again, and I think that we are collaborating with the other 40 school districts in Sonoma County, and so there have been regular calls about, so what are you doing? What are you thinking? Because there's a great desire that the districts do something similar so that there's not confusion among the 40 school districts. And so, I think that, the rurals who have one school and, 8 kids, they can likely open because they have sufficient space and they don't have the number of students that we do. But if you begin to have, more than 20 kids, it suddenly becomes, you need to make some plans. And the larger you are, the more planning needs to happen.
well, my other concern amongst many is the longer we wait to make a decision. I get we want community input and stakeholder input. I get all that. But what I don't want to be in a position where we're saying to parents, I mean, we're in the middle of June. I don't want this going till the middle of July. And we say to parents, guess what? It was decided we're going to this, and you have like 3 weeks to figure it out. I would rather see we come to some sort of decision as a district. The sooner the better, to give parents as much planning time. Say we decide to go to all distance learning, and we spend the next 6 to 7 weeks beefing up that program for students, staff, parents. That gives everybody a much longer period to have something that will actually work, as opposed to saying, okay, you've got 3 weeks to figure out what you're going to do with your kids, how we're going to get equipment back out, laptops, hotspots. I just really hope that we can give people, parents, staff, students, a much longer lead time. I know we had like spring break. That was it to figure it out. So that's my concern.
In talking to some of my colleagues, when you see the number of operational protocols that need to be in place to ensure that staff and kids are safe, is it actually doable by the time school starts? And I think one superintendent is considering that they're going to potentially do distance learning for the first quarter, maybe the first semester, so that they can get these things in place. And perhaps then we know what the staging status is, that it's shifted, that we're able to bring some students back. But I think, again, that as long as there is not a vaccine, I believe that we're going to have to be creative and innovative and do some things differently, again, so we're able to protect the people in our community. I mean, I read something the other day that was a high school in Los Angeles that they estimated this 2,500 student high school had the potential to impact 100,000 people as it's going through the community. And so, you know, again, I think that what we've heard and we've been told is that we should expect another outbreak. It could be larger, we don't know. But as people kind of get more comfortable and think that the problem's gone away, I think we can anticipate that there's unfortunately going to be more cases.
Well, and that's the thing. Even if you go through one of these hybrid models, some distance learning, some at school, if you get a kid at LJ or a middle school who tests positive, and they have a sibling in an elementary school and a sibling in the high school, you are now talking about not just this classroom that the child is in who tested positive, but their siblings, everybody in their classrooms, and their extended family. So you're basically talking about not just one classroom, but you're talking potentially the district being in shutdown mode again, because you've now exponentially, potentially exposed thousands of people.
I mean, one of the statistics that we heard, or one of the protocols that may be in place, was if a student or staff member in one classroom has been infected, that class is shut down for 14 days. If it's in more than one classroom, the school is shut down for 14 days. So again, we haven't gotten exact guidance on or direction from the public health officer what that's going to look like, but those are some of the considerations, those are some of the things we're hearing. And again, it goes back to how do we protect the most people from not getting this virus?
And my last thing is it possible for one of your IT guys to take the slides that you just presented us with your comments and just clip that? I mean, I'm getting so many questions from so many parents about so many different things that I don't, and it ends up leading to, you know, 1,000 more questions because of the exponentially difficult circumstances. So is there a way to get your comments with the slides out to all parents so they could see that these are the questions, these are the issues, as opposed to people saying, well, for those parents who feel comfortable sending their kids to school, let them go to school, and for those who want to stay home, stay home. It's just not that simple.
Right. Well, I think that because we record the meetings, there's likely a way that we can do that.
Okay, that would be great.
Thank you.
Questions from other people?
Yeah, Les, this is Tim.
Go ahead.
Mike, I really appreciate all the work that you and your staff have done in this, especially how you've communicated really well to the board and stakeholders on what we're facing. And I understand that everything is contingent on what happens. And so we can't make any decisions right now. But I agree with Krista that the longer we give parents the chance to prepare, the better. So I think that's a good rule of thumb, you know, given the fact that we're waiting for decisions by the health officer and legislature and others. But I want to make my position clear. And my position is that we need to start as soon as possible developing a robust distance learning component, because that component is part of every model that you've listed to a certain degree. And I want to know if we have been able to map out what a robust distance learning component looks like, and how fast we can, how long it will take us to ramp up that robust component, and what goes into that. So I favor continuing with distance learning throughout the fall semester and the first semester, and until we have that component ramped up. before we start bringing students back to any significant level. And if we don't have that capacity ramped up, and then we have to shut down again, either through an outbreak within the district or within the community and state at large, then we're going to be going back to a distance learning component that will not be adequate to the task. And so I think the first step is developing a robust distance learning component. And I think we should hire a new staff person who knows how to do that, and put that person in place and get that going as quickly as possible, because every model depends on that component being in place. And if we have an outbreak, we're going to need that component to be robust.
Okay. Thank you.
Joe or Jennifer?
Yeah, I would just like to say, I think it's very important to get that parent survey going. Though I think the answers we get back from parents are going to be very important to hear what worked, what didn't work, what they need help on, and whether they intend. I mean, one of the big questions should be, what's their intention? Or do they want to come back, or do they not want to come back?
Yep. We're asking those exact questions, and it's being translated right now, so we should be able to push it out tomorrow at the latest on Thursday.
Perfect. We'd love to hear the results.
Oh, and Mike, and one other thing that Carissa raised is, because the fences were torn down years ago in the recent past by previous administration, it seems like it's going to be really difficult to have a single point of entry without fences. And how are you going to do that?
That's a really good question that I don't have the answer to. But again, I think that we need to look at those kinds of things. Putting fences up creates a whole other community perception and, again, costly item. But again, I think that the folks at our school sites working with us and the community can figure that out, to figure out how we're going to do that. It's going to take lots of communication. It's going to take people to kind of retrain themselves, but I believe that we'll be able to get that. And if we don't, then maybe we have to look at more significant types of measures.
Joe?
Yeah, it's just, the same, like me, just as a parent, it's just to like think, plan for the, what we're going to be doing next year. That's like one of the most stressful things. I just wish, I know this is like, unfeasible, but if there was just a plan, even if it's not the best plan, but something that we can like get a plan and stick to it for a determined amount of time, I think that would at least, we would know where we stand and what we have to do and what it's going to look like. Not knowing is the most stressful thing, because you're just constantly thinking like what's going to happen. At least if we know, and maybe it's not the best situation, at least and we can make plans. Not just talking with just my close group of friends and people I've talked to. That seems to be the most stressful thing. To talk about what they're doing, what works best for them is secondary. The first is, what are we going to do? So that's all I have to say. And I really appreciate, like, I could tell you guys, we're like super thoughtful, and you have all the questions out, and, you're thinking about all the different ways that this affects people, and especially with not having any, much guidance and knowing what's going on. I appreciate that. I can tell you guys really care and are putting energy into it.
Thank you.
So I'll just fill everybody in. A week and a half ago or so, Lori Fong from Santa Rosa City Schools invited all the school board presidents to be on a Zoom conference to discuss this, a lot of the things that we've discussed tonight. They had CSBA on there, which now CSBA has come out with their suggestions. They and a lot of the same concerns. What are we going to do? Enrollment concerns. It's good that enrollment will be frozen, so you won't get penalized for that. Mike, you described about 2 years worth of work to be done, and we have roughly 60 days before schools open. I'm concerned that this is all falling in the administrator's lap because aren't all our teachers on summer break now, or most of them?
Our teachers are on break, and I think that one of the things that I would suggest we do is to find to invite some of our teachers to come back to help us develop some type of stipend or negotiate some type of way that we can compensate them for their time. Because again, this is going to be a lift, and I do think we need to include them in the conversation because they're going to be implementing this. And so I think it's really important that we hear their thoughts and concerns and their ideas and suggestions because, they lived it for the past couple of months. And I think we can learn from their experience and they can learn from each other. And I think that we can do this, but it's going to require us to tap some of our own people to help us get it done.
I read yesterday on EdSource opinion piece that they had done with a lot of statistics that they had gathered, but I did not know that almost 20% of educators in the state of California are over 65. And that even impacts them, I think, a little bit more in the COVID-19 situation. I did not realize it was that high.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that we didn't touch on specifically, we talked much about our families and childcare needs, but many of our staff members have childcare needs as well. And so, their kids are in schools either with us or somewhere nearby. And they're also going to be having to react and respond and prepare to whatever their student school district is doing.
Right.
So, Mike, I have a procedural question. There has been some talk that the superintendents in Sonoma County, hopefully this will be true, that they'll hang together and decide on a common plan for all the districts, which would, make a lot of sense. But will the superintendents decide which model to use, or will the board vote on the superintendent's recommendation for the model?
I think that each district is going to create their own plan based on the needs of that community. I think there may be some overarching agreements, but it's going to have to work for what's going to work in that particular community. And the feedback that the board's given us this evening is very helpful. It provides some guidelines that we need to think about and consider. And it's very clear that there's a desire to have some type of action plan or some type of plan in terms of how we're going to start school so families can plan, so staff can plan. So I think we heard that loud and clear. And so I think that that's the direction we will be heading just in terms of to make a decision sooner than later.
Okay, well, and I think Joe said it the best. I apologize, Tim, but I think Joe said it the best, that our plan is probably not going to be a plan that's going to satisfy everybody 100%, but a plan has got to go forth for the parents that will both work, that have multiple kids and multiple sites, and the same thing with our staff that may be teaching here and have children that go elsewhere. It's going to be a heavy lift for everyone, but Joe hit it on the head. We've got to make a decision as soon as feasibly possible to give as much lead time as we can to everyone involved.
Right, I agree. I'm just trying to pin it down in terms of procedure. Like, so are we looking at Mike bringing an action plan to the board at our next meeting in June, or are we looking at a special meeting in July where Dr. Perez will bring an action plan to the board for approval? What are we looking at?
I think my suggestion would be that we provide the board with the results of the survey information that we collect between now and the next board meeting. I think that we will have some indicator of what our fiscal resources look like at the next board meeting. I think that we may have some more information about are we able to meet all the health and safety guideline protocols, and to provide the board really a status report of where we are and what we think we can actually get ready in time for school to start, and then share that with the greater community.
So Mike, you're talking about the June meeting?
I think we can provide an update. I think that I wouldn't want to commit to providing you with a plan by the 23rd.
Should
Mike,
we try to schedule a July meeting since we don't have one?
I believe that would be a great idea, and I can talk with Dr. Perez and we can talk with the board president.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm off track. I lost my train of track. Yeah, it'll come back probably tomorrow. No, here, your survey. So the survey, Mike, who's that going out? It's got to go out to more than the parents. It's got to go out to our teachers and our staff.
We have different surveys. We have a survey for families and we have a survey for staff.
Okay. So we will be bringing back both from that time.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other shareholders than those that we're missing?
I mean, I think we can talk with some of our community partners, but I think that's going to be more conversational than survey. I think that, at the high school level, maybe we do some surveys with kids to get their thinking about what worked and what didn't work over the last several months.
I would like to know, I don't know if you're putting this on the survey, but if they're having any difficulties getting internet.
Exactly. It's those
and then,
you want to know.
Yeah, and then the question is for those families that aren't participating as robustly as we would like them to, how do we address that?
Well, I think that hopefully, if the principals have a good idea in their interaction with their teachers in terms of we were tracking which students that we hadn't heard from, which families we hadn't heard from. And there was direct personal outreach made and to make sure that we had contacts, to make sure we knew what was going on. I mean, it just ranged from we don't have internet access, there's no adult here to help supervise, to we moved out of state and we're accessing some of the distance learning, but it was interrupted because we're moving. It's a range of things. But again, I think that we're hoping to get a robust response, and I think we can do that, and we'll provide what we receive to the board at the next meeting.
I'm perplexed because I often like to see a plan and I don't see a plan, and I'm sure everyone is too. And then the other big question is, what's the virus going to do? Which we don't know. We are at the mercy of that exploding back up. Say we get into fall or winter, and then it just is going to shut everything back down, and we'll have to go to all distant learning. So
I mean, I think if we make a determination, if staff makes a recommendation to go all distance learning, we know what we're planning for. And so, because that we haven't made that determination yet, I think that we would want to make that determination, and then we can make good use of people's time in terms of planning, and we can let people know early so they can make plans themselves.
Yeah, I'm not the expert, but that would be my wish. If you know, just because that would give you 60 days to plan that,
Yep.
and go for a semester and see what it's going to look like after that. I mean, the state colleges have done it for a year.
Yep.
They're in a little bit different environment type of thing, but I see a huge difficulty of putting 12 kids in a classroom and disaffecting that classroom, and then the other 12 will rotate in, and it's a logistical opportunity. Let's put it that way.
I mean, let me remind the board that Richard Crane opens in July. Our plan is to maintain that opening date at this point in time. And so we do have an opportunity to try it with a small school before we roll it out district-wide. And so we've had some conversations with Teresa Raffoni, the principal, and are trying to anticipate the kinds of things that we're talking about for a school that opens in, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks. So, and we can provide.
Let me ask you, oh, sorry, Mike.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
So we're still in stage 2. The health officer, I don't know how she pronounces her name, Dr. Maz. Is that how she pronounces it?
I think so, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, I apologize if it's Massey and not Maz. She has said it's going to be another 2 weeks before she decides if she's going to open anything else up or if we're even going to move to stage 3. So don't know about Richard Crane opening in a few weeks, but if it did, have you decided to cap enrollment at what it is now? Because you could have parents who want to send their kids back to school say, okay, well, let's just stick them all over Richard Crane, and then your 193 kids goes to 500 quickly.
Well, I mean, so if we were to plan to open Richard Crane at this point, we'd plan for a distance learning opening.
I see. Okay.
And I think in terms of, we have a capacity for the school based on the number of staff that are there. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I like to say that one, positive way to look at it is as of July, we'll have 2 superintendents, and Myra has a big background in curriculum. So, of all the other stuff going on, I feel that makes me feel good about that. That we have 2 people who, Mike's got a lot of experience, and with their background in curriculum, we can come up with a more solid plan than I think other people. And, I really wish that we would do just a distance learning. And to me, it definitely isn't the best situation for my family personally, but it's something that we can aggressively work on and, come up with a good solid plan, and build on what we have, and make it even better. So that's just, like everyone else is saying, I honestly feel that way too.
Well, I really appreciate the feedback the board provided in terms of information you'd like to see, as well as your perspective on how we open, and it's helpful to us.
I'll unmute myself. Other questions? It's just, I think this is the most difficult thing I've ever seen of being a board member for so long. So,
well, the
new opportunity.
None of us have ever done it before. So,
you never done it before. it makes you grow. It makes you, expand your comfort zone. So, but I think we've got great people working, and we'll get there. It's just the unknown is difficult for me right now.
Yep.
Other questions before we move on to the next topic? Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone, for all we've done, and more to come. So, okay, we will go to, if no one objects, we'll go to 10D, acceptance of gift and donations to the schools and district. Page 22. Is somebody giving us millions of dollars? Oh, no. We have one contribution for food service for $50 from Victoria Carlson. So thank you. So can I have a motion to accept that donation?
So moved.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, and Joe will be the second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We'll go to 11A, board member reports and future agenda items. So we've all kind of talked. Does anyone else want to share more?
I'll pass.
I think everyone's, well, I'll speak. Everyone might be a little shell-shocked right now, so, but feel free
I
to.
just hope everyone stays healthy and safe. That's all I have to
I
say.
hope everyone stays healthy and safe too.
What'd you say, Joe? I didn't hear you.
I just wish everyone stays healthy and safe.
Yes, that too.
So just a side thing, Joe and I kind of last minute, we kind of found out about the high school drive-by graduation. We attended that. We sat far apart. We were way away from the students, and we saw that come up. That was a little something for the students, for their parents to drive them up in a car and then get out and walk across the stage and pick up a diploma and have their parents cheer and yell. I mean, it's not quite the same, but it was something. So thank you, Louis, and the students at the high school and the advisors that put that together. That's something. So I agree. This is a tough mental health time, and anything you can do to kind of prop somebody up and get through this, we'll do that. And then I, like Joe, I hope everyone stays safe and healthy and we weather the storm.
I just want to say again, congratulations to our 2020 graduates. It's been a very trying, long year. And I wanted to put out a special thanks to Robert Grant and to Jane Paletti for all the photos they take of all of our kids throughout, every year they're out there taking pictures, and that's what we have to remind us of all the time. So I'll put that out. Thank you, guys.
Okay. If not, we'll go on to 11B, Superintendent's Report.
Just a couple of items. We conducted our last principals meeting this past week. Our principals are quote unquote off for the summer, but I don't know how long their summer will be. We are in the process of, we've posted the two principal positions we have, Monte Vista and University Elementary. We'll be interviewing for those two positions later this month and bringing recommendations to the board. We continue to participate in weekly calls with California Department of Ed, with AXA, with CSPA, with anybody who's offering a call. We're listening in and participating. So we hope we have the most current information as we move forward. We did form what we jokingly called the thermometer committee, but that led to many, many questions about many of the protocols we're talking about. And we've engaged our nurses and some of our staff in those conversations, and those will continue. And I think that's it.
So, a big thank you to everybody. This is a trying time, a lot going on, and we'll get through it. We'll just think positive. It's just going to be lots of challenges and lots of opportunity. The glass is half full, it's not half empty. So we'll get through this and we'll learn more, and hopefully will make us all better people. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting and thank you to everybody and stay safe. Good night.
Bye.